Welcome to Supermiata. Tecnas. Yeah, finally. After about 4 years in development, we finally have the Tecna shocks prototyping done. These are actually the first production samples, so not just a proof of concept, but actually what we're going to be shipping to the customers. These just arrived a few days ago. A few more tests to complete, and then we will begin production. We are not taking orders for the shocks just yet, but we will be probably first or second week of September here in 2022. If you'd like to be notified when they're going to go on sale, shoot us an email, info@949racing, just ask to be put on the Tecna mailing list. And a little heads up, we don't spam like 2 emails a day like everybody else does. We do maybe 3 or 4 emails a year, so it's pretty rare that you'll get an email from us, even if you're on the mailing list. So, we're going to do 4 videos on these shocks. This first video is just going to be just kind of a brief introduction, a little bit about the specs and a few details, ordering information. We're going to have a second video that's going to be a really long, deep dive technical video with product comparisons, description of all the terms, and we say things like hysteresis and nitrogen charge and progressive spring rate. You're like, well, you know, what's he talking about? Well, we'll kind of go into that in that second deep dive video. Part 3 will be just a simple unboxing video, straightforward. Part 4 will be a tuning and setup video, which will go into doing the damping adjustments, the preload adjustments, and kind of how to pair it to your car, what kind of sway bars and alignment, what tires to choose, and that'll be part 4 video. Those will be coming out later. But so this video is just about brief introduction, let you know what the shocks are. So without further ado, let's dive in, shall we? Tecnas are our coilover system for the 90 to 2005 MX5 Miata. That's the NA and NB chassis. Now we have one SKU for both. These come completely assembled with an NB style mount. And we say NB style because this is a replica of the factory 99 to 05 mount, but we actually make these our own. The reason we do that is so we can make them orange, which is worth like 2 horsepower, but mainly so we can reduce the cost on these because these are quite expensive from Mazda. So these are monotube coilover. They use a 44 millimeter piston. They are high pressure nitrogen gas charged. The production shocks are actually going to have a black lower cap here. It won't be silver like these are. And then the springs, I think, are going to be kind of like a medium gray color. But otherwise, this is what the shocks will look like. It's a 2.5 inch diameter coil. We do that for tire clearance, particularly on the fronts. If you've got a really wide tire, it comes really close to the springs, and that allows you a little bit more tire clearance to put big wheels and tires on it. They come standard with shock boots. These have a 10-year limited warranty on them. They do have adjustable damping. It's 30 clicks. And that covers a damping sweep. It's narrower than the sweep on Zetas. If you're familiar with our Zeta shocks, if you're not, go to our website. It's XIDA. That's our premium, basically gold standard, high performance race shock for the Miatas. The Zetas have a very wide damping range from full soft to full stiff. So you can run them really, really soft for street use or really, really stiff for like a time attack car with big race slicks. Tecnas are about like the bottom third of that range. They go soft and they go slightly firmer, but they don't go really, really stiff. We just didn't put that damping range in there. But we'll cover that more in our deep dive video on why we did that. But essentially it has to do with the longevity and the warranty period that we do with these. These are a steel cylinder. So this is an extruded piece and then CNC machined, and then billet aluminum lower cap. The shock bodies are one piece. That's as differentiated from a 2-piece coilover. If you're curious about the difference between 1-piece and 2-piece, there'll be a separate video linked in the description below describing the differences between 1 and 2-piece. The reason we mention that is because most of the shocks in this price range are 2-piece, and 2-piece shocks are made because they're less expensive to produce. That's why they exist, not because they're a better shock. They're cheaper to make. Manufacture. To do a 1-piece shock like this requires a lot of custom parts, and they have to be made in higher quantities. So you kind of have to commit to a custom shock for one car in order to do a 1-piece, which is what we do. We're Miata specialists. So this is a 1-piece shock. This lower cup here is basically the cap for the cylinder. The bottom of the cylinder is open, so the oil would just come out, and it basically caps on there. You don't adjust the length of the shock. Now you do have a preload adjustment collar here. You turn this collar and it'll of course increase the preload, which basically raises or lowers the car. And Tecnas are going to be offered in one variation. So they come with a 6 kilo front spring, 4 kilo rear. That's roughly about 336 and 224 inch-pounds with a high rate helper spring. And we're going to ship these not only fully assembled, but fully torqued and ready to go into the car. So you don't have to take any parts off of your old shocks to put on these. These, you pull them out of the box, you put them right on the car. We actually have a kind of a starting preload. It may not be the ideal preload for you, but it'll be somewhere in the middle of the range and the car will be more or less level. so that you don't have to put them on the car and kind of mess around with preload before you even test drive it. You can just put them on the car, don't touch anything, just torque down all your suspension bolts, go drive it around the block a couple times, let the suspension shuttle come back, and then measure your ride height and say, I think I want to raise it or lower it, I want to raise the back a little bit, but it'll give you at least a starting point. So that's something that we'll do right out of the box. Now we expect we're going to get a lot of people asking us, well, are these just budget Zetas? And if you don't know what Zetas are, again, you want to go back to our website. The short version, Zetas are kind of the gold standard high performance race shock that's off the shelf, something you don't have to custom build. You can just click a button on the website, they get shipped out to you, and it's a world-class race shock that we make for the Miatas, for all generations of Miatas. So a lot of folks will look at these Tecnas and they go, oh, they're just budget Zetas. Well, they're really not. These are really designed to be a shock that doesn't require service, whereas a Zeta does require service periodically because it's a pro motorsports level race shock. These don't require any service. They come with a 10-year warranty. And these are designed basically for your street car that might get a little autocross, might get a few track days, but really it's like 90% to 100% street cars. Really for the person who just simply doesn't want to spend a lot of money, doesn't need a fancy set of Zetas because they don't ever use the stiff damping settings. And this is something we learned with our Zeta customers. We have a lot of Zeta customers who don't ever use the stiff damping settings. They buy them and order them with really soft springs. And they just use them as street shocks because they ride so nice, but it is kind of overkill. And you do have to service them periodically. So we thought, what if we build a shock that kind of operates on the street on the soft damping settings the way Zetas do when they're adjusted that way, but without the service requirements and without the extra costs. And a key thing here, which I won't get too much detail in this video, more in the second deep dive video, is the heat management. People don't think of shocks in terms of heat management. It's just a shock that goes up and down. But they are essentially, they're kind of like brakes in that they're heat exchangers, because that motion of the car going up and down, that motion doesn't get lost. It gets turned into heat and it gets put into the oil, into the body, and it gets basically radiated out into the atmosphere. Race shocks are made out of aluminum and have a high oil volume, and if you ever look at off-road race shocks, they have actually fins and radiators and stuff on them to deal with all the heat. So heat management's a critical thing. And if you're running our Zetas, a lot of people run endurance races 12 hours. They generate a mountain of heat, and these shocks are simply not built for that. They'll work, they'll just fade a little bit, the same way like a Spec Miata Bilstein shock are known to fade. When Spec Miata went to the Penske aluminum shock, they found that the shocks would not fade as much in a 40-minute road race. And that's kind of what you're getting with something like this. They're not designed for a 40-minute road race or a 6-hour enduro. They'll work, they're just not going to work as well as Zetas will. We build Zetas for that purpose. So these, by getting rid of that extra performance envelope that the vast majority of you don't need a shock that'll go for 12 hours in an endurance race. I just want to go to work and I want to lower my car and I want it to ride nice. We build a shock just for that, and that allows us to lower the price and to give the range of adjustability. So that's what Tecnas are. It's a street shock. It's really, we think it's the best street shock on the market in this price range. And it's funny, the features that we have in this shock and the way they're made, they actually compare with shocks that are $2,000, $2,500, $3,000, other stuff on the market. But we know that a lot of you are going to compare these to shocks that are priced about the same, even though they don't have the same features. Most of the other Miata shocks in the market that are priced about the same as these don't have the features. They don't have the adjustment range. They don't have the ride height adjustment range. They don't have the warranty. They don't have any of the bump travel and stroke. These have a really, really long stroke. The rears are, this little short rear has 120 millimeters of stroke, which is the highest free length to stroke ratio of any Miata shock on the market, even our Zetas. And we went through a lot of work to get the stroke in the rear shocks. What that allows you to do is it allows you to lower the car and have it still not bottom. Usually on a Miata, when you get coilovers and you lower the car, it bottoms a lot and the car's bouncing around. But to get it to where it actually floats through the bumps and absorbs everything while it's lowered requires a very special shock internal system, and that's what we've got with the Tecnas. So that's the brief overview. Look for our part 2 video, which is going to be our deep dive. Again, if you want to be put on the mailing list, shoot us an email, info@949racing. Meanwhile, you're free to call or email us and ask us tech questions about these. So that's about it. We'll see you at the track.